We've all felt it, that sudden gasp in the dark, the heart pounding against the ribs, the lingering chill of a world that wasn't real, yet felt more real than waking. Nightmares, they visit us in the silent hours, leaving behind not just fear, but questions. What are these echoes from the dark? Are they merely broken fragments of the day? Or do they carry a deeper, older voice? For centuries, we've called them demons, hags, night riders, external monsters to explain an internal terror. But what if the true visitation is not from without, but from within? What if a nightmare is not an attack, but an urgent, an opened letter from the deepest parts of who we are? It is easy to see them only as pathology, as errors in the system of sleep, disruptions to be silenced. And yes, they can be born of stress, trauma, fever. They can revisit old wounds with cruel fidelity. Yet to see them only as malfunction is to stand before a door slammed shut in the dark, and never wonder what lies on the other side. The psyche speaks in symbols, not diagnoses, and a nightmare is its most forceful, vivid symbol. It is a shock to the system, a cry from the unconscious, when we have been too long unaware. Consider the sensation itself. Unlike ordinary dreams that fade with the morning light, nightmares cling. Their intensity etches them into memory. They arouse not just fear, but a complex tapestry of dread, anxiety, ancient sorrow, profound embarrassment. They feel important, because they are. They are the bubble of all we have repressed, expanding in the dark until it must burst into our awareness. They are nature's own shock therapy, a desperate attempt to make us see what we have diligently ignored. The ancients understood this urgency in mythic terms. They gave it a name, Lilith, born not from Adam's rib, but from the same dust. She was a figure of defiant equality banished from the garden. In her exile, she became the night monster, the succubus, the nocturnal spectre. Her story is not just one of demonization, but of recognition, the recognition of a powerful, rejected force that returns in the night. She is the embodiment of all we cast out in order to maintain a comfortable, daylight self. And she will be heard. The very word nightmare carries this ancient weight. The mare is not the horse, but the Anglo-Saxon mare, a goblin or hag that sits upon the chest, bringing bad dreams. In Norse, the mara. In German, the Alp. Across cultures, the experience is the same. A pressure on the chest, a terrifying presence, a suffocating paralysis. Today, we call it sleep paralysis, a physiological explanation for a universal human experience. But the imagery persists. Our modern science describes the mechanism, but our ancient stories describe the meaning. It is the feeling of being pressed upon by something unseen, something that demands our attention. There is a Norse tale of King Vanlandi, cursed by a spell to return home or die. As he resisted, he grew sleepy and cried out that the Mara was treading on him. His men held his head, and it trod on his legs. They seized his feet, and it pressed upon his head. He was caught in a terrible, literal tension between the call to return and the refusal to move until the pressure itself killed him. A nightmare can feel like that, a tension between two unbearable opposites, with the self caught in the middle, crushed by the weight of an unresolved choice. Yet these stories also hint at another possibility. In one folktale, a man tormented every night by a Mara devises a trap. He plugs every crack in his room, drills a single hole, and waits. The Mara enters, as it always does, through that tiny opening. His friend plugs the hole, trapping the creature inside. In the morning, the demon is revealed as a beautiful, naked woman. He marries her. They have children. They live in happiness, until the day he reveals the secret of the hole she entered by. She flies out, and is gone forever. The tale is profound. It suggests that what we trap and face, what we bring into relationship, even the terrifying visitor, can transform. Integration is possible, but it requires that we do not let it escape back into the unconscious unknown. We must be willing to live with it, to see its true form. This is the first step in understanding nightmares, to shift from seeing them as something that happens to us, to something that is happening within us. They are not random. They are purposeful. They are, as the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung suggested, part of the psyche's self-regulatory function. Dreams, he said, are nature. They show us unvarnished truth, and are fitted to give us back an attitude that accords with our basic nature when our conscious mind has strayed too far from its foundations. If consciousness is a small island brightly lit by the spotlight of our attention, the unconscious is the vast, dark sea surrounding it. The nightmare is a wave from that dark sea, crashing onto our orderly shores. It brings with it the contents of the deep, not to drown us, but to deliver a message. Jung called this the compensatory function of dreams. They compensate for the one-sidedness of our waking attitude. If we are too rigid, they bring chaos. If we are too fearful, they bring monsters. If we are too avoidant, they bring pursuit. The nightmare, therefore, often presents what Jung termed a shadow. The shadow is not evil, but the totality of those parts of ourselves we have deemed unacceptable: our anger, our shame, our wildness, our vulnerability, our power. It is everything we have hidden away in order to be civilized, liked, or safe. Because it is repressed, it gathers energy, and because it is part of us, it knows us intimately. In nightmares, it often appears as a sinister pursuer, a monster, a malevolent stranger breaking into the house of the self. The instinct is to run, to hide under the bed, to wake up. But the pursuit never ends, because we are, in truth, running from ourselves. The key lies in the turning. What if, in the dream, we could find the courage to stop fleeing? What if we could turn and face the pursuer? There are accounts of lucid dreamers doing just this and finding that the monster transforms. Its terrifying face softens. It speaks. It says, "I don't want to hurt you. I've been trying to give you something. I've been trying to get your attention." The hostility turns to amiability, because the energy is no longer bound in fear, but released into consciousness. The shadow, when faced, often holds a gift, a lost part of our vitality, our instinct, our truth. This is not merely a technique for sleep. It is a metaphor for waking life. How many of our daytime anxieties, our irritations, our recurring problems are like nightmares in slow motion? They are patterns that chase us, pressures that sit on our chest. We try to outrun them, ignore them, medicate them away, but they persist because they carry a message we have not yet heard. The nightmare is simply the most dramatic, concentrated form of this inner signal. We can see this played out with terrifying clarity in art. Fyodor Dostoevsky, in Crime and Punishment, gives us Raskolnikov, a man split apart by ideology and poverty. Contemplating a murder he believes he is entitled to commit. On the eve of his crime, he dreams. He is a child, watching a peasant beat an old, feeble mare to death. The animal is overloaded, exhausted, but the drunk crowd eggs the man on, laughing, until they all take part in her brutal murder. The child runs to the dead horse, kisses her bleeding head, and sobs to his father. Why did they kill the poor horse? He wakes up in terror, gasping, "Can it be that I shall really take an axe, split her skull open?" For a moment, he renounces his plan. The nightmare has shown him the true, brutal nature of the violence he is about to commit, not an intellectual theory, but the visceral, senseless destruction of the vulnerable. It is a mirror held up to his soul, and though he ignores it, the dream's function was perfect, to compensate for his waking rationalizations with a shock of raw, moral feeling. Franz Kafka captured the nightmare not of violence, but of bureaucracy and alienation. Joseph K. is arrested for a crime no one will name, tried by a court he cannot find, judged by laws he cannot know. Gregor Samsa awakes to find himself transformed into a monstrous insect, his humanity trapped inside a shell that revolts his family. These are not fantasies. They are the externalization of inner states of guilt, anxiety, and the feeling of being fundamentally wrong, trapped in systems or bodies that do not feel like home. Kafka's genius was to write fever dreams while awake, showing us that the nightmare can be the atmosphere of a whole life. For those who have lived through trauma, the nightmare is not symbolic, but literal, a relentless, involuntary replay of the past. Post-traumatic nightmares are prisons of memory. Here, the therapeutic task is not so much interpretation as integration and healing. The psyche is stuck in a moment of terror, and the nightmare is its attempt, however brutal, to process the unprocessable. Trauma therapy is, in a sense, a guided awakening from that recurring dream, a gentle helping of the psyche to place the event in the past, and not the eternal present, but for the more common, symbolic nightmare. How do we begin this dialogue? How do we turn from the fleeing figure to the facing one? Jung proposed a method he called active imagination. It is a conscious, waking engagement with the unconscious. One enters a state of quiet receptivity and allows an image from a dream or a troubling feeling to emerge and take form. You might ask, who is it that feels this anxiety? What does it look like? And then you wait. You let the image speak. You engage with it as if in conversation, not directing, but listening. It requires solitude, silence, and a courageous suspension of judgment. The goal is not to conquer the unconscious, but to converse with it. In doing so, something remarkable happens. The need for the intense, disruptive nightmare diminishes. The issues are being worked out in a collaborative space between conscious and unconscious. The dreams that do come become more focused, less repetitious. It is as if the psyche no longer needs to shout, because you have finally started to listen. Another path is through the dream itself, via lucid dreaming. To become lucid is to know, within the dream, that you are dreaming. It is a moment of waking up inside the dreamscape. This awareness can be cultivated through reality checks in waking life, through dream journals, through intention. Once lucid, you are no longer a passive victim of the nightmare's script. You can stop, turn, and confront. You can ask the pursuing shadow, what are you? What do you want? The answers can be transformative. That which seemed monstrous may reveal itself as a lost part of your own soul, desperate for recognition. This work is not for the faint of heart. It asks us to descend, to entertain the very images we spend our lives avoiding. It asks us to befriend the darkness. This is why artists often dwell in this territory. Painters like Zdzisław Beksivsky and H. Geiger did not create their haunting, post-apocalyptic landscapes and biomechanical nightmares from a desire to shock, but from a fidelity to an inner vision. They became chroniclers of the shadowlands. Beksivsky called it photographing dreams. Geiger's art, a fusion of flesh and machine, explores the primal traumas of birth, sex, and death. They went into the dark recesses we all fear and made a home there. Their art is the proof that what is brought into the light of creative expression is its power to haunt in secret. It becomes, instead, a shared, transformative artifact. They show us that the confrontation with the shadow can yield not pathology, but profound meaning and beauty. This is the alchemy of the nightmare. It is raw, unprocessed material from the depths of the self. Left in the dark, It terrifies. Brought into relationship, it can become a source of strength, creativity, and wholeness. The terrible mother, as the analyst Eric Newman called this archetypal force, is also the great mother. The womb can be a tomb, but it is also a place of rebirth. The tension in a nightmare is exactly this: the regressive pull back into the undifferentiated dark, and the progressive pull toward a greater, more conscious life. The nightmare is the crisis point between the two. We spend so much of our lives building a persona, a presentable, competent, agreeable self. This is necessary. We must function in the world. But when we identify solely with this persona, when we forget the shadow, we become one-sided. The repressed material does not disappear. It gains a charge, and eventually it erupts. It may erupt as a nightmare. It may erupt as a sudden, inexplicable rage, a deep depression, a compulsive behavior, or a profound sense of meaninglessness. The nightmare is often the kinder eruption. It is a private, symbolic eruption that asks for understanding, not a public, destructive one that causes harm. So, the next time you wake in the dark, heart racing, do not rush to dismiss the feeling. Lie still for a moment, breathe, remember the image. Do not analyze it immediately. Simply hold it. Feel the residue of the emotion. Ask yourself, with gentle curiosity, where in my life do I feel this same pressure, this same pursuit, this same helplessness? The connection may not come instantly. It is a practice, a slow tuning of the instrument of perception. You are both the dreamer and the dreamed, the monster and the child, the one who flees and the one who turns. The night is as long as the day, and a happy life cannot be without its measure of darkness. For the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. The nightmare is not the enemy of your peace. It is, perhaps, a forgotten guardian of your wholeness, standing at the threshold of all you have shut away, asking not to be let out, but to be let in. The doorway does not lead out into the night. It leads inward, to the rooms we have sealed. The visitor is not a stranger. It is a part of you, long exiled, finally coming home, and all it has ever wanted is to be seen, in the light of your own awake and conscious mind.